Well, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development has today released its 2012 Economic Survey for Australia. The survey has praised some of the structures already in place, but recommends other reforms that would stoke not just economic interest, but plenty of political debate. Well, to discuss the paper and some of its key points, the Secretary-General of the OECD, Gurria, joins us live from Paris. Mr. Gurria, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
You've referred to Australia as the Iron Man of the OECD countries. What do you mean by that?
Well, you're growing at about double the rate of the U.S. and you're growing at about 4 times the rate of Europe, because, well, in Europe some of the countries are growing, are contracting as we speak. Your level of unemployment is about half that of the average of the OECD, and your public finances, you're having this lively discussion as to whether you're going to have a surplus or not, or whether you can get to the surplus or not. When you're having double-digit deficits in many countries, in the largest countries in the OECD, you're having 6, 7, 8% deficits, and when you're having accumulated debt to GDP ratios of 100% average on the OECD, and when your debt to GDP numbers are around 20 or 30% for the gross and about 10% for the net debt to GDP, your banking system is stable, it's well capitalized and well regulated. What can I tell you? I go on and on and on, but it just, this is why we say it's the Iron Man, but it's also you've kept it going. And the way you're looking at it now, it looks like it will keep on going. The Iron Man is not only a test of strength and speed, but also of resilience and of keeping it going over time, staying the course.
Well, it's a while since I read Iron Man comics, but as I recall, he was very much reliant on an artificial heart. Are we relying too much on the resources sector to keep our economy beating?
Well, remember, the Iron Man is not a comic character. It's also a test of stamina in the field. And clearly, when you have resources, like Australia does, when you have the mining industry, then the question is how to make the most of it, and then how to avoid the consequences like the Dutch disease, as is known in many countries. I come from Mexico. We had our own Dutch disease because we have oil. And when we discovered the oil, we neglected a number of other things, including, by the way, the structure of the taxes. So we now rely too much on the revenue from oil. So the question is how to have a structured tax system that is balanced and that does not depend too heavily on the mining. But at the same time, if you have resources, if you have a wealth that, of course, by definition belongs to the whole of the nation, the exploitation of that should, of course, benefit the whole of the nation. So that is something which is absolutely legitimate. And the question is, how do you manage it better? We are saying, for example, that perhaps the creation of traditional sovereign wealth funds in the case of Australia may not be as urgent a need as you had in cases like Norway or Chile with the copper, basically because you are renewing the sources of the mining wealth, you are discovering new deposits, and also because technology is making it possible to recover more and more of this wealth. So you are doing well, but it's not because you have an artificial heart. It's because you have kept the fundamentals right. You have kept a good diet and good exercise over long periods of time.
As well as raising the possibility of establishing a sovereign wealth fund on the back of the mining boom, the report also recommends, in regard to what you were just talking about broadening the coverage of the mining tax. Can you explain a bit more by what you mean by broadening the coverage?
Well, the question is that if you only fix it in certain large enterprises, then it can distort. I would say the more the broader the application of any tax by definition, and this would allow for regardless of the size of the companies, this would allow for a better overall functioning. I would also say that, remember, the discussion and the application of the mining tax is a very, very recent, very young event. You have been growing uninterruptedly for about 21 years, okay? So going back to what it is that you're doing well or that you're doing better in a world that today is fumbling for solutions and trying to find ways in which they can get back on the growth path, or sometimes just back on the black numbers rather than the red numbers for the deficits, or for growth for the financial system, etc.
In regard to that pursuit of the black numbers, in regard to the government's determination to return the budget to surplus next year, a lot of doubts have been expressed about this push, this pursuit. Even a senior government MP today has spoken out, raising questions about whether this is really the time to be doing that when there's so much going wrong internationally. What do you think of this push in this country to a surplus at this time?
Listen, you are growing at 3.7% this year. You're going to keep the growth at around 3% as far as we can see for 2013, 2014. This is the time when you go into fiscal consolidation. Why? Because you can. Now, the fact that there are problems around the world, and it's fine, you know, you take note of that. You're cautious. That means you have to be ready to adjust the rhythm of the consolidation. Now, if you have suddenly, because of international reasons and maybe because the prices of commodities fall too drastically or whatever, if you have a fall in the rate of growth that you would not be envisaging, then, of course, things can be adjusted. And the timing with which you're going to get to the surplus position can be prolonged. But right now, you are in a position to do so. This is, you know, getting into a surplus, whether it's 0.1 or 0.3 or 1%, it's a message, it's a language, it's a signal. In a world where the largest economies in the world are having 6, 7, 8%, 9% deficits, having a surplus of any size is a massive call to the world to say, hey, things are happening here, we're doing things differently, take note.
Globally, where do you think the biggest threats lie in regard to the Australian economy in the short term, in the coming year?
Well, you seem to have, I think, navigated well, and, you know, because of your own good policies, but also because your partners are doing the right things, and that's going to have a positive impact in Australia. The Chinese in particular are back on the growth path. We think they're going to be growing at maybe 7.7% this year, with stronger growth in the second half of 2012. And then we're going to have upwards of 8%, maybe up to 8.5% in 2013, and close to 9% in 2014. This is what we are projecting, and that is going to benefit Australia directly. On the other half, what are we saying? On the other side, what are we saying? Don't depend only on China. Well, don't depend only on Asia. Of course, this is easy to say, but what you're doing is saying, okay, how do we plug into Asia, in the Asian century, if you will, for the better impact for Australia? That is wise. That is the thing to do. That is the strategic thing to do. But then, of course, you say, but there's the rest of the world, and there are productivity issues, and there's education issues, there are innovation issues, there are questions of competition, there are questions of the R&D system, there are questions of the linkages between businesses and universities and research centers, etc. All the structural things that take more time to gel and to bring their benefits to the Australian economy, but which, of course, are required because you have a base of educated young men and women which can be incorporated into a more services-oriented economy into a more knowledge-based economy. That is, of course, the future of Australia.
Angel Gurria, the Secretary-General of the OECD. A pleasure to speak with you, sir. Thanks so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, and again, congratulations to the Ironman of the OECD. Congratulations to all Australians because of a good public policies, but of course the effort of all the Australian citizens.